Here we are again with the interesting about Revelations, the interesting things. And I just have to say, it's going to get very interesting. It's going to be something that most people will try to say, oh, it's confirming the book of Enoch. But no, it's not. It's actually saying things that are contrary to what, in the order of how they're supposed to be done and in the way in which it's supposed to be understood. No one is going to convince me that John the Baptist saw more than Enoch. No one. No man shall see as he has seen. No man. Now, having said that, we start in the book of the Revelations, or at least on this website here. I'll try to have both the links up there for you. And I'm just going to read the ones that I think are more or less in line. Let's just go ahead and get it. Let me see. Listen to this. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Stop right there. Interesting. Interesting. Death and Hades both get into the lake of fire in their minds. Not going to go there right now. Give me a moment. And then the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire, and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Okay. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and liars, and their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So the second death concept has become a thing. No, I won't read just yet. We won't get to the book of Enoch just yet. Let's just read a couple more. Let's read this long one right here. And when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea. And they marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. But fire came down from heaven and consumed them, and the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and there will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Now listen, y'all. Makes absolutely no sense that would even be the case. Why? Because why would the Most High God let Satan escape just to do all that? It just doesn't make sense. This is supposed to be the end time. Now let's read something that's a little more in line with that. I want to read both of these, but I'm going to read the right side first. In those days, this is the book of Enoch, chapter 66 on this internet, but it's 67 in the book normally. In those days, the word of God came to me and said, Noah, behold, your lot has ascended up to me, a lot void of crime, a lot beloved and upright. Now then, shall the angels labor at the trees, but when they proceed to do this, I will put my hand upon it and preserve it. The seed of life shall arise from it, and a change shall take place, that the dry land not be left empty. And I will establish your seed before me forever and ever, and the seed of those who dwell with you on the surface of the earth. It shall be blessed and multiplied in the presence of the earth, in the name of the Lord. And they shall confine those angels who disclosed impiety in that burning valley, which is at first my great grandfather Enoch showed me in the west, where there were mountains of gold and silver, of iron of fluid metals, and of tin. I beheld that valley in which there were great perturbation, and where the waters were troubled. And when all this affected from the fluid mass of fire, the perturbation which prevailed in that place, there was a strong smell of sulfur, which became mixed with the waters, and the valley of the angels, who had been guilty of seduction, burned underneath in its soil. Through that valley also rivers of fire were flowing, to which those angels shall be condemned, who seduce the inhabitants of the earth. And in those days shall these waters be to kings, to princes, to the exalted, and to the inhabitants of the earth, for the healing of the soul and body, and for judgment of the spirit. Their spirits shall be full of revelry, that they may be judged in their bodies, because they have denied the Lord of spirits, and they perceive their condemnation day by day. They believe not in his name. And as the inflammation of their bodies shall be great, so shall their spirits undergo a change forever. For no word which is uttered before the Lord of spirits shall be in vain. Judgment has come upon them, because they trusted in their carnal revelry and despised the Lord of spirits. In those days shall the waters of that valley be changed, for when the angels shall be judged, then shall the heat of those springs of water experience an alteration. And when the angels shall ascend, the waters of the springs shall undergo a change and be frozen. Then I heard holy Michael answering and saying, this judgment with which the angels shall be judged shall bear testimony against kings, the princes, and those who possess the earth. For these waters in judgment shall be for their healing and for the death of their bodies. But they shall not perceive and believe that the waters will be changed and become a fire which shall blaze forever. Stop right there. Stop right there. Which one of these sounds like it's giving you a better, clear explanation of what's actually going on? And give me one moment to find out my physical copy of the book of Enoch of when the sheep get judged, and then I'll get right. I will try my best to get right, because I know that this is what it has to be. Okay? And when I say that this is what it has to be this because this is where we're at. So I'm gonna navigate to chapter 90. It might be a chapter off, so let's see. Teach you guys a little trick. One moment. Yeah, it seems like it's the right one. But let me just see if I can't get to the right part, because this might be the chapter before. Let me see. Chapter 90. And let me see how this starts. I think this is a chapter off. Let me see if it's forward or backwards. Let's try chapter 91. Even though this is a good one too, I don't want to use this one. There's the where I'm at. It gives a very clear depiction of of the characters who are all going to go in, and that's what I want. Maybe it's 89. Let's see. It's numbered differently on the internet for some odd reason. There we go. Oh yeah. So it's numbered one backward. Okay. This is the one. And still, this is y'all just getting to see that there's a way to do this, right? Or there's a way to search it all out on this little website. I'm going to leave the link in it for you because the first page is hard to navigate. But if you put whatever you're looking for and roughly the chapter and just keep the HTML in it, you should be good to go. Now let's just look over this real quick. And before we do that, let's go back again to Lake of Fire and all that stuff. Revelations 19:20. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet, who in its presence had done the signs by which he had deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. Now, the only reason why they know that it burns with sulfur is because of what? Because the book of Enoch tells us that it smelled of sulfur. What, you think they just made that up out of nowhere? Okay, let's blow this up for you just a little bit. I think that's pretty good right there. Yeah. Now let's just read. This would be 89 on the internet, but it's 90. It's chapter 90 in your regular book of Enoch. Okay. And I observed during the time that thus 37 shepherds were overlooking, all of whom finished in their respective periods as the first. Others then received them into their hands, that they might overlook them in their respective periods, every shepherd in his own period. Afterwards, I saw in a vision that all the birds of heaven arrived, eagles, the avexed, kites, and ravens, and the eagle instructed them all. This is why they try to claim that they're like a nation who's eagle-like, all that stuff. Anyway. They began to devour the sheep, to peck out their eyes, and to eat up their bodies. The sheep then cried out, for their bodies were devoured by the birds. I also cried out, and groaned in my sleep against the shepherd which overlooked the flock. And I looked while the sheep were eaten up by the dogs, the eagles, and by the kites. They neither left their body, nor their skin, nor their muscles, until their bones alone remained, and their bones fell upon the ground, and the sheep became diminished. I observed likewise during this time that 23 shepherds were overlooking, who completed in their respective periods 58 periods. Then were small lambs born of those white sheep, who began to open their eyes, crying out to the sheep. The sheep, however, cried not out to them, neither did they hear what they uttered to them, but they were deaf, blind, and obdurate in the greatest degrees. I saw in the vision that ravens flew down upon those lambs, that they seized one of them, and that tearing the sheep in pieces, they devoured them. I also saw that great horns grew upon those lambs, and that the ravens lighted down upon their horns. I saw too that a large horn sprouted out on an animal among the sheep, and that their eyes were open. He looked at them. Their eyes were wide open, and he cried out to them. Then the Dabela saw him, all of whom ran to him. And besides this, all the eagles, the avexed, the ravens, and the kites were still carrying off the sheep, flying down upon them and devouring them. The sheep were silent, but the Dabela lamented and cried out. Then the ravens contended and struggled with them. They wished among them to break his horn. but they prevailed over him not, but they prevailed not over him. I looked unto them, until the shepherds, the eagles, the avest, and the kites came, who cried out to the ravens to break the horn of the Dabela, to contend with him, and to kill him. But he struggled with them, and cried out that help might come to him. Then I perceived that the man who had written down the names of the shepherds who had ascended up before the Lord of the sheep, he brought assistance, and caused everyone to see him descending to help of the Dabela. I perceived likewise that the Lord of the sheep came to them in wrath, while all those who saw him fled away. All fell down in the tabernacle before his face, while all the eagles, the avest, ravens, and kites assembled, and brought with them all the sheep of the field. All came together and strove to break the horn of the Dabela. Then I saw that the man who wrote the book of the word of the Lord opened the book of destruction. Of that destruction which the last 12 shepherds wrought, and pointed out before the Lord of sheep that they destroyed much more than those who preceded them. I saw also that the Lord of sheep came to them, and taking in his hand the scepter of his wrath, seized the earth, which became rent asunder, while all the wild beasts and birds of heaven fell from the sheep, and sank into the earth, which closed over them. I saw too that a large sword was given to the sheep, who went forth against all the beasts of the field to slay them. But all the beasts and birds of heaven flew away from before their face. And I saw a throne erected in a delectable land. Upon this sat the Lord of sheep, who received all the sealed books, which were opened before him. Then the Lord called the first 7 white ones, and commanded to bring before him the first of the stars, which preceded the stars, whose form partly resembled that of horses. The first star, which fell down, and they brought them all before him. And he spoke to the man who wrote in his presence, who has one of the 7 white ones, saying, take those 70 shepherds to whom I delivered up the sheep, and received them killed more than I commanded. Behold, I saw them all bound and standing before him. First came on the trials of the stars, which being judged and found guilty, went to the place of punishment. They thrust them into a place deep and full of flaming fire, and full of pillars of fire. Then the 70 shepherds were judged, and being found guilty, were thrust into the flaming abyss. At that time, likewise, I perceived that one abyss was thus open in the midst of the earth, which was full of fire. And to this were brought the blind sheep, which being judged and found guilty, were all thrust into the abyss of fire on the earth, and burnt. And the abyss was on the right of that house. And I saw the sheep burning, and their bones consuming. See how much is left. I'll run through the rest of the switch, y'all. I stood beholding him emerge that ancient house, while they brought out its pillars, every plant in it, and the ivory folding in it. They brought it out and deposited it into a place on the right side of the earth. I also saw that the Lord of the sheep produced a new house, great and loftier than the former, which he had bound by the former circular spot. All its pillars were new, and its ivory new, as well as more abundant than the former ancient ivory, which he had brought out. And while all the sheep which were left were in the midst of it, all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of heaven fell down and worshipped them, petitioning them and obeying them in everything. Then those 3 who were clothed in white, and who, holding me by the hand, had before caused me to ascend, while the hand of him who spoke held me, raised me up, and placed me in the midst of the sheep before the judgment took place. The sheep were all white, with wool long and pure. Then all, then all who had perished and had been destroyed, every beast of the field, and had been destroyed, every beast of the field, and every bird of heaven, assembled in that house. While the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because all were good and had come back to his dwelling. So, what that part right there is saying, if we just go over it real quick, because some people would think that it's talking about everybody who's a bad person is going to heaven. No. Then all who had perished and had been destroyed, every beast of the field and every bird of heaven, assembled in that house. While the Lord of sheep rejoiced with great joy, because all were good and had come back to his dwelling. So what happened is that all the actual righteous beasts of the field and birds of heaven are there, not just any old wild a bird of heaven who was just trying to do the most. Any wild beast of the field. And I saw that they lay down the sword which had been given to the sheep, and returned it to his house, sealing it up in the presence of the Lord. All the sheep which had been enclosed in that house, had it been capable of containing them. And the eyes of all were open, gazing on the good one. Nor was there one among them who did not behold him. I likewise perceived that that house was large and wide, and extremely full. I saw, too, that a white cow was born, whose horns were great, that all the beasts of the field and all the birds of heaven were alarmed at him, and entreated him at all times. So it's not a bull in this one, it's a cow, just like it's not a ram, it's a Dabela. But anyway, we'll just keep reading. Then I saw the nature of all things was changed, and that they became white cows. And that first, who was in the midst of them, spoke when that word became a large beast, upon the head of which were great and black horns. While the Lord of sheep rejoiced over them and over all the cows. I lay down in the midst of them. I awoke and saw the whole. This is the vision which I saw, lying down and waking. Then I blessed the Lord of righteousness and gave glory to him. Afterwards I wept abundantly, nor did my tears cease, so that I became incapable of enduring it. While I was looking up, they flowed on account of what I saw, for all was come and gone by. Every individual circumstance respecting the conduct of mankind was seen by me. And that night I remembered my former dream, and therefore was troubled and wept because I had seen that vision. Listen, y'all. I don't want to get into how the anointed one is going to be a light unto the Gentiles. There's a lot of things that I understand. I know every Gentile is not a bad individual. I know that already. I know all the people on the earth are not all evil. But the idea that you can trust, you can't trust any of them, because right now you don't know who's who. The good do good by the right do right by the righteous, and the wicked do right by the wicked. So you have to separate yourself, and then you have to see what rises to the top. But reading that and just seeing all these things right here about the revelations, nothing like that came up. Even if you wanted to talk about, okay, the house, even if you want to say that the house is heaven meets and that's the new creation, right? It's transformed. Okay, that's fine. You still don't see some of these things being written there. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. Wait, where did y'all read that at? Did y'all see that anywhere? I didn't see that anywhere. I just want y'all to understand that I'm trying to do the best that I can to show you that I know that there's going to be a new earth, uh, and that the heaven's going to be transformed. I get that. But as far as there just being like the way that people like want them to think like they're just going to be destroyed or no. Enoch's first vision, his first vision was that heaven was going to fall onto the earth and push all that is on the earth down into the abyss. That's neither here nor there. No, that is. That's the blessing of knowing things like that and being able to just share it with you. Unless you want me to read it to you, but you could always read it yourself. Brothers and sisters, these two links, Open Bible Info and QBible.com, will be in the video. I appreciate all your time and all your patience. I just want to say that it's not as easy as people think it is. You know, it's easy to assume that you know something. It's easy to assume that you get it. Uh, but it's a lot better when you actually put together once again everything that you know all at one time and apply it all to that same message. This is where I stand with it, or this is where I am with it. Uh, if you want to believe in the lake of fire, that's in the Revelation. If you want to believe in the book of Revelations, that's on you. But just reading things like that and having it clearly broken down to you, you should feel a lot differently. Anyway, brothers and sisters, I'm out.